The button opened 3x, the big blind defended. Flop comes queen jack 9. Martirosian checked, space c-bet 1/3 pot. Martirosian called, turn comes an ace. We can actually first review pre-flop to see how the ranges look like there. So we saw space opening 3x, and when we look at range converter. So the stack sizes were actually right in between 30 big blinds and 40 big blinds. They were playing like 35 big blinds effectively. So it might be interesting to look at how the strategy changes for 30 big blinds compared to 40 big blinds. So when we look here at the small blind, the opening range, you can see that range converter used an opening sizing of 2 big blinds only. Space went in this case a little bit bigger, went for 3x, so perhaps his range is a little bit tighter than GTO suggests here. But as we can see is that at 30 big blinds, it actually wants to do quite a lot of calling, a lot of limping, 54% of the time, and raising 44% of the time, and basically playing the full range. And at 40 big blinds, I assume we're gonna see more raises because you have more chips to play with, and which is what we can see. At 30 big blinds, we are limping 54% of the time. At 40 big blinds, we are limping only 48% of the time. So a little bit less limping and a little bit more raising. We can see the small blind is supposed to do a lot of raising, 43% of the time. At 40 big blinds, it was a little bit more, raising more, 48% of the time. So that's what he did. He actually raised a little bit bigger. But normally it's the case when somebody raises bigger, you risk more. And because of that reason, you have to be a little bit tighter. But of course, also with this, like it's always going to be somewhat of a guessing game. Especially with heads up. Some people raise 3x with the whole range. Some people only raise bigger with the aces and kings. And then everything else they limp. Especially with heads up, it's a lot of guessing. And I think also with this, and this is where what I use GTO for mostly, is that when you don't have any information, that you just have like a strategy, a game plan that you can rely on.
Makes perfect sense. I think that with these tools and how it's been recently, the quality of it, and I think the default player really is getting a lot better in tournaments. People, kind of these things are you're noticing that the standard player in a lot of live events and even online, I think that the caliber of player, the you kind of got to have this stuff, right? You got to be able to do this, and this is just a way to really catch up quickly. And if you're doing this type of work, you're going to have a big advantage, right? You're just going to be the people that do work and don't, you're kind of separated immediately into being a competitor and a contender and not. So,
All right, so we discussed pre-flop, we saw a raise from space, and then we saw this flop of queen jack 9, and Martirosian checked, and space decided to bet 1/3. And now we're gonna look at a range converter, whether that was the right strategy or not. So we're gonna let the small blind raise. Big blind's gonna call. We're gonna start at 40 big blinds. The flop was jack 9 queen, jack of diamonds. And this is also new. You can now basically, it's what they call isomorphic board. So you're able to select the exact suits. And especially for recreational players, it's just really nice. Whereas before you just had select suits. Now you can just have all kinds of orders, all kinds of suits, however you please. So can you have it, exactly represented as it went down. So the big blind checked, and now we see the strategy for the small blind. And what you can see actually is that the small blind is supposed to check so often. Is this something that you would expect? Like, what would be your general strategy when it gets us a board? Because it feels like a really good board for the button being the original raiser here, not facing a 3-bet.
Yeah, I would think I would lean towards bet, but I guess I see some merit to checking there and not getting check raise. What he has with the king 8, right? He's got king high. There are definitely, it's a pretty wet board. There's straight draws, flush draws, even though you do have the king of hearts. And I would think it would be a mix. Yeah.
The big blind checked. And what we can see indeed, like you mentioned, is we actually seeing a mix here of the king 8 offsuit. When we look at the overall strategy, you can see how often the button is actually supposed to check here, 64% of the time. And the main reason for this, and this is what I always use this info panel for here in the middle, is that when you look at the equities, you can see that the equities run super close. It's 52% for the small blind here for the button, 48% for the big blind. The equity realization is quite higher for the button though, at 111% versus 87%. And also when we look at the EVs, it's 1.94 versus 2.71. But because both ranges are so wide, you can see there's a lot of checking going on, and especially because the equities run really close here.
Interesting. And where does the king 8, where does that fall in, this particular hand combination?
So you can see here the king 8 offsuit. It's actually doing a mix here. but mostly betting actually on the bigger side. 32% of the time it's going for 2 first pot, betting 3 big blinds, and checking 35% of the time, betting 1 big blind for 10% of the time, and then the other time it's betting 1.86 big blinds. But yeah, so we can actually see, like you say, it's actually doing a mix, but actually mostly betting on the bigger side. I think with the king 8 offsuit, you've got a gutter to a 10, of course. You block some combinations, you block the king 10, you block the 10 8. So in that regard, I think it's a really good hand that you can use here as a bluff. And then when we, can touch on the topic again of simplifying your strategy, like you can see the king 8 offsuit is a mix, really. King 10 offsuit and mostly wants to bet big. And then king 7, probably mostly with the hearts that we want to bet. So you could, for example, say, okay, maybe with the king 6 offsuit and king 5 offsuit, I'm not going to bet as often. And then with the king 8 offsuit, I'm always going to bet because we have better blockers. Because like it's so tough to really nail down those frequency, as we mentioned. It may be easier to simplify it that way. But yeah, mostly here in this case, the button actually wants to go for a little bit of a bigger sizing, going for 1/3. And 1/3 is going to be 1.5 big blinds, so the 1.8. GTO wants to bet a little bit bigger, the 2/3 more often. But Space went for a smaller sizing here. Yeah, what are your thoughts on his sizing here with the 1/3? Would you like to go bigger here? Would you like to go smaller?
Yeah, I actually don't mind. I don't mind the sizing. I do think this is a very complex board. I would have actually thought there would be some, more checking back, and if you were to maybe bet a little bigger. It's just kind of a weird spot when I just feel like there's so many hands that can semi-bluff, right? That will, the 10x, the heart draws, even though you do block, you block, you have good cards, right? You're wrapped in the area. I just feel like it's not, it just, to me, it feels dicey. I just think you're going to get played back at a lot by betting, and it puts you in a weird spot when 10x, check raises you, or like a flush draw might check raise you. So I think I actually would check there. That would be my thought. But yeah, I mean, maybe that.
You would check with the king 8 offsuit?
Yeah, well, I was saying I think it said, did it say a third of the time it would check there, or what was the solve? What did it?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like player dependent too.
Checking like 50%.
Yeah, I think Arts are just also, he's so aggressive and so tough. I just feel like you're just gonna give him, you're just gonna get yourself, and by default when it's close, I feel like I don't want to give him as much opportunity to be creative and kind of punish here. But yeah, so as played though, right? I think he gets check raised, right? Or was it just a call?
He actually gets called. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, I do remember. Okay, the action. Yeah, there was a super interesting run out with that ace turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just calls. So I actually think the king 8, I think with the smaller sizing, like what you mainly accomplish is that you get all this air to fold. The 7-6 offsuit. Like, is he really gonna float on this board with like the ace highs? Also not as likely. So I feel like with the smaller sizing, it's mostly just trying to fold out all this air. And on various runouts, for example, this one with the ace on the turn, he's probably still gonna be able to put the 9x under a lot of pressure. So I think that's the reason why he went for a smaller sizing. Mostly, I would probably also go for either a check or going really big. Probably mostly going really big to really start pressuring the 9x, the jack-x. And, because there are so many turns that you can continue on, I feel like. Like, for example, on the ace, you can continue on hearts probably. On diamonds, it's not too bad to continue on. It's probably even better than hearts because you can actually, you block a way stronger flush draw, or flush in that case, with the king of diamonds. So I feel like there are quite some turns that you can continue barreling on. Also, when a low card comes, if we went big on the flop and we also continue big on the turn, we can put a lot of pressure on the jack-x and 9x. And the question is then, of course, is he going to be able to really call those down? But yeah, Space actually indeed went for the smaller sizing. Martirosian just called. And maybe it's interesting to look at how often the big blind is supposed to check raise here when the small blind bets 1/3 there. So we're going to let him bet 1.86 big blinds. And we're going to look at what the big blind is supposed to do versus it. So you, as you mentioned, you expect Martirosian to check raise here a lot. So it's interesting to look at what GTO suggests. So GTO actually suggests to fold here very, very often. As we can see, it's folding a lot of the a6 that we mentioned. All the low cards it's supposed to fold. And what it's calling is it's actually continuing with quite some of the king x actually. With the gutters to a 10, of course. A lot of pairs, the queen x, the jack x, 10x with the open enders, 9x. And then letting go of all the air. And then it's actually raising many of his flush draws. The weaker flush draws, because the better flush draws, of course, are paired up and stuff. And that's kind of how he constructs his range. So it's also the king 10 offsuit, so the straights that it's raising some of the two pairs. And what's actually really nice is that you can change here the info panel to BB breakdown in this case, and you can actually highlight it. So you can see, okay, with the straights we are raising very often, with 2 pairs we are raising, but also calling a lot. Top pairs we're calling a lot. So you get a better idea of like how it's broken down, your range.
Okay, so then as played, so what then he reps it, he goes big and gets called, obviously, not full. That's basically the best card for Artur, really. I mean, yeah, it's just a card that your opponent's going to be repping on bluffs. You're under repped, you didn't raise pre-flop, you float the flop. Not many ace X's you're going to have here, and that is what works out against Space, because he's now telling the story that Artur has, and so what, it's a big bet and a call, right? And that the sizing shows that's a big sizing on the turn, right? That's preferred.
Yeah.
So what's really cool to see is that once we see that the small blind bets, we can see that the big blind is supposed to fold a lot of a6, right? And that's why the turn is such a good turn for him to continue on as well. So the big blind checks, and then when we look at the small blind strategy here at GTO, I think very often on the turns you are going to see more of a polarized strategy here, mostly going big, which you can see here as well. In GTO, wants to bet either like 2/3 pot or actually going over pot. Here at 10 big blinds, over potting 23% of the time, and actually going 2/3 pot 57% of the time. And actually not checking very often, only checking 19% of the time. And that's because it's such a good turn here for the small blind, because the big blind doesn't have as many a6. And now the river comes a pure brick. So the river completely breaks with the 5 of spades, so all flush draws miss. The 9x and jack-x that stick around are gonna be in a really tough spot when they face another barrel here. Queen X, also not top pair anymore, now second pair, but all flush draws miss. And I don't know about you, but in my experience, when all flush draws miss, people tend to be really, really sticky. So Space actually does decide to pull the trigger here, going all in, putting Martirosian in a really tough spot. And as we saw, Martirosian really took his time to think this through with top pair, blocking the straights, the king 10s, the 10-8s, blocking 2 pairs. Also blocking some really good bluffs that Space could have though with the 10 of diamonds. Diamonds a really good card that he could continue on. He blocks it though, but he also blocks a lot of value. So he was thinking for a really long time, and I think what's going to be most interesting to look at is how Space is supposed to construct his range. So when we go here to the river, we can see the big blind is never supposed to dunk out here on this board, always supposed to check. And then when we look at Space, you can see it's supposed to check 42% of the time, then betting 2/3, 18% of the time, but also actually going all in 40% of the time. At 30 big blinds, it was actually even more when we go here to 30 big blinds. And as we mentioned, it was right in between, between 30 and 40. It was 35 big blinds effectively. You can see it's checking 41% of the time, going all in 59% of the time. When we look at the king 8 offsuits, you can see at 30 big blinds, it wants to check all the king 8s with the king of hearts and the king of diamonds. And it actually wants to use the other bluffs, because with the king of diamonds, you actually block a lot of snap folds that the big blind may have. So also when we look at 40 big blinds, we see the same, although it's bugged. So we'll use the 30 big blinds to make it easier. So we can actually see that GTO actually does want to bluff in this spot, because Space was having Space has the king of diamonds. So GTO actually suggests to not bluff in the spot. Actually wants to give up here.
Because having for the reverse for Artur, what is true, it's for him with these he has the missed diamond heart combo, the other stuff. His actual hand combinations would sort of imply too he's got the draw, right, or he's missing. So it's that makes sense to me. Yeah, I thought there was no way that Mortizan was gonna. I didn't think he was going to fold. I mean, he's just so high up in his range, and he has a key card that is good. I mean, I guess it sort of balances with being bad, but he blocks the straights. He has the ace, a strong ace in the spot. I just felt like it was I never thought he would fold, but he did take a while, as we saw.
It did take a while.
So GTO actually already suggests to give up here the king 8, and what then is always important to look at is the range that GTO suggests for the big blind, his calling range, his folding range, is that actually realistic? So when we look at the range for the big blind, you can see that versus an all-in here is supposed to call all the a6 that he is still having, and we just said on the turn already that he's probably having more ace-6 than he's supposed to because he decided to just call the ace-10 offsuit pre-flop, whereas GTO suggests to re-raise it. He is supposed to start folding like a lot of queen-x, but he's calling all the, even like the king-jacks, you know, third pair with a blocker is supposed to call. King-10, of course, with a straight supposed to call. Also king-9, fourth pair. It wants to call in the GTO world. So I think when we assume that the big blind may have more ace-6 than he's supposed to, and is coming to the river with likely to be a stronger range, then the bluff would actually become even less good.
Right. Well, I think, yeah, the interesting part, though, about the ace-x is, like, there's not, on the flop, there's not, I don't know, maybe because the sizing is small, but you would think there wouldn't be that many ace-x's coming. You know what I mean? Because, like, if you just have, like, ace-4 there, like, are you really just going to call bet on that board?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, with such a small sizing, probably, like, the ace-4 with the ace of hearts, you may peel once, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw.
But it's not an appetizing board, you know. I think you also see that a lot. People in heads up, they generally don't defend. Like when they play an ace kind of weak and it's a really bad flop, they're just kind of like, all right, you know, I'm gonna get more resistance. I may not be good. I feel like I only have 3 outs, and they think more from that perspective than, oh, I'm beating hand still and let me stick on. Now, great players will, like, but not a lot of times. Just I think recreation and medium players are just, oh, okay. I was being deceptive with an ace calling, hoping to hit an ace and having a player. But, you know, be betting, of course, like on a 4-4-6 flop or 5-5-7 flop with ace-4 off, you know, you feel good. But when it's like this type of board, or, you know, it's like, oh, okay, like I'm probably beat, or if I'm not beat, they have some draw and they get to shell. So that's, I think. But yeah, interesting hand. What a game. That was a lot of fun. And ultimately, Archer did make the call and win the event for, I believe a record 6 or 7, something crazy. He's won the Super Million, so the guy is just an absolute beast. But no, I love it. This is so much fun, and I hope we get to do this more often. And like I said, Brian, I know me and him did it. Love to do one with you and Brian soon, coming up, and sort of blow his mind on the new software of it is. I think he's taken a look a few times, but I don't know if he's seen quite this and all the features, functionality. So appreciate it. It's been fun, and thank you to Mr. Stevie. This was a treat, and we'll definitely be doing more of this.
Yes, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So in case you liked the video, guys, make sure to like it, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one with hopefully Brian on as well. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jeff. I'll see you guys in the next one.